Hi, welcome to part 2 of lesson 1 for unit 1 on exponents and radicals. We're going to start, we're on page 2 and we're going to talk about square roots. So the square root of a number is the number that you multiply by itself to get the number you started with. So you all know the square root of 16 is 4. This is a little bit, what they've got written here is a little bit misleading because I would I would cross that out because the square root of 16 is 4. This is a convention, even though -4 times -4 does equal 16. If you're asked for the square root of a number, you give what we call the principal square root, and that's the positive number. On the other hand, and we'll see more about this later, if you have x squared equals 16, then you're going to take the square root of both sides. Then you can say that x equals plus or minus 4, because that is true, that if I take x squared, if 4 squared equals 16, and -4 squared also equals 16. So that's true. But if you're just asked for what is the square root of 16, then the answer is 4. Okay, we'll do a lot more with that later on. So a perfect square is a number that has a rational number as a square root. So 16 is a perfect square. If you have a non-perfect square, that's when the square root is irrational. Again, I would cross off the -1 there because we just talk about the principal square root in that context. This table of numbers you should have memorized. You should uh, okay, so you should. I'm gonna have a post. I'll talk about that in class. Okay. Yeah. You should know these ones. These are just numbers that life is easier if you know these, just like your times table. Okay. And so we're just going to do some examples of calculating these. You probably all know how to use the square root button on your calculator. If you don't, you can definitely come ask me. So let's just estimate this. So 46, what we can do for 46 is if I'm going to come over here, 46 is in here somewhere, so it's between 6 and 7. It's definitely closer to 7, so I'm gonna guess that that's around 7. And if I take my calculator and I calculate the square root of 46, I get 6.9. It's approximately 6.9 with my calculator. Okay. Negative square root of 5. Well, the square root of 5 is going to be up here. It's going to be close to, not 4, so it's about, it's about 2. Because 5 would go in here, so the square root would be over here. So it's about 2, and it's going to be negative because this negative is making this whole thing here negative. All right? And then with the calculator, I get negative 2.2. And that makes sense because it's going to be bigger than 2, right? A little bit bigger than 2. It's going to be in here. Okay. For question C, this is going to be approximately 2 times the square root of 18. Well, we can estimate that as 4. And plus 5 times the square root of 37, which is going to be about 6. Minus the square root of 5, and we already determined that that's going to be about 2. So if I add that all up, I get I get 36.66. And, oh, did I do that? I'm sorry, I'm just looking at my notes. I can't remember if I did that with my, oh, I know what it is. If I add that up, oh, I see what happened. Sorry. If I add that up, I get 8 plus 30 plus, or minus 2, so that's 38 minus 2, so that's about 36. And then with the calculator, I get 36.66 or 36.7. So that's like, it's reasonable, right? I wouldn't do calculations like this by estimating them unless it's just to check, is my answer reasonable? And yeah, it is. Okay, so this one is the square root of the square root of 95. So since the square root of 95 would be in here, I'm actually going to estimate that as 10 because it's closer to 10. So my estimate is that it's going to be the square root of 10, since square root of 95 is about 10. And the square root of 10, if I come up here, so that's about 3, approximately 3. And then with my calculator, I get the square root of 95, square root of 95 is approximately square root of 9.9, which is about 3.12. Okay, I hope that made some sense to you. And then were these estimates reasonable? Yeah, they were all pretty close to what we got using the calculator. All right, now let's just take a quick look at cube roots. Cube root is when you have a number multiplied by itself 3 times. What number would you multiply? So if I want to know the cube root of 1,000, it's 10, because 10 times 10 times 10 equals 1,000. Okay. And every a positive number is going to have a cube root. Actually, positive and negatives have cube roots. Oh, that's actually something I meant to mention back here. You cannot take the square root of a negative number. It doesn't exist. It's not a real number. Okay. So, for example, here where I've got just going to change my color for a second. If I had the square, oh, it doesn't like to change colors. If I tried to take the square root of -5, that does not exist. Okay, there's no answer to it's not a real number anyway. Okay. Okay. Cube roots, back to cube roots. If you're taking the cube root of a negative number, you only have a negative number as your result, because -3 times -3 times -3 equals 27, -27. Okay. And again, we can have a rational cube root or an irrational cube root. All right, let's try and do some estimates here. So cube root of 11, 11 is in here somewhere. It's closer to 8. So that would be approximately 2. And if I use my calculator, I get 2.2. Cube root of 120 would be somewhere close to 5. And we would expect it to be a little bit less than 5, and my calculator tells me it's 4.9. This one, okay, it's going to be about 4 times square root of, square root of 70. So the square root of 70 is, 64. Square root of 8 is, square root of 64 is 8. So this is going to be about 8 minus 4 times the cube root of 70, and the cube root of 70 is going to be in here, but closer to 4. So we'll estimate that as 4. So that's going to be 32 minus 16, which is 16. Okay. And then if we calculate it, now, oh, sorry, if you don't know how to use your calculator to get the cube root button, the cube root, you probably have a button that looks something like that and that, something like that. And I will, or it could be an X or a Y in there. If you can't find it, ask me and I'll help you out with that. If I calculate this one, I get, well, if I calculate this first part, I get 33.4664. Now, it's really important, if you're rounding it to one number, it's really important that you write down and retain at least 2 digits past what you're going to round it to at the end. Otherwise, you can end up with something that's not quite accurate enough. All right, 16.4851. And then when I do that calculation, I get 16.9813, which I'm going to round to 17.0. And I actually should have that 0 there if I'm rounding it to nearest tenths. All right, so that's the end of this lesson, and you can go and do questions 8 to 16. That's the end of this lesson 1. Bye.